Hello, everyone who has joined us, and welcome to our second webinar of the year. I'm Jill Escher. I'm president of Autism Society, San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm pleased to be presenting Dr. David Traver and Jenni Mai, who will be speaking about medical cannabis for autism. All of you who are online, you are on mute. If you have questions, please submit them via the question bar. If you are on the phone and you need to submit by email, our email is info@sfautismsociety. What I wrote there is actually wrong, .org. The webinar is being recorded, so if you have to leave early or you need to, leave for a bit, don't worry, it'll be available online. Your hosts today are myself and our Vice President, Feda Almalidi.
Hi, guys.
Introductions. Dr. David Traver is a board-certified pediatrician in private practice here in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics. He received his degree from Boston University and completed his residency in pediatrics at Boston City Hospital. He has focused on ASD for the past 20 years and has worked as a pediatrician in the PDT clinic at Stanford. He employs an integrative, functional and biomedical approach to ASD, constantly researching evidence-based translational agents and incorporating them in treatment. Jenni Mai is the president and co-founder of Whole Plant Access for Autism, which is a nonprofit based here in California. She's a graduate student at Louisiana State University, although she lives here in California, pursuing a Master of Science in Nonprofit Administration. She's the mother of 3 adult sons who are all on the autism spectrum. She and her family moved to Southern California after becoming medical refugees, seeking legal cannabis to treat their middle son, Nate. Of course, we have to have a disclaimer. The first disclaimer is just sort of procedural. For those of you who are looking for a real basic overview or introduction to medical cannabis for autism, this is really not designed for you. Rather, we are just doing pure Q&A format for people who largely already have a familiarity with the issue. Also, as you know, the webinars that we provide and our speakers and partners, we provide information, but none of this information constitutes medical or legal information. We do this as a service to the community. And if you need to have any particular medical advice about your particular situation or legal advice, we encourage you to consult appropriate professionals. There are some questions that have been submitted that are very specific to an individual rather than sort of broader in scope. And please understand that we can't give no one can give medical advice, and it's hard to really be very, very specific about situations where the practitioners don't have background information. Okay, so with that said, let's move on. Again, Feda's going to take it, and then we will switch off asking the questions that have been submitted ahead of time. We have more than 20 submitted ahead of time, and then we will also intersperse some of the questions that are being submitted live. Okay, Feda.
All right, guys, so let's get started. So Jenni and Dr. Traver, so whoever one of you guys want to take this one. So are there any health conditions, physical or mental, that would be contraindicated for the use of cannabis?
I can take that off the bat. And Jenni, obviously you can, please supplement anything that you feel is, insufficient. As an MD, the one condition we're always aware of is anaphylaxis or some sort of formal allergy to an agent or the components of any kind of substance. So that would be an absolute contraindication. And anything relative with, if there's been some exposure to any of these substances with untoward responses in the past, obviously you're not going to keep trying them with, indefinite use. You're going to try to get some sort of framework and advice, but that would be the first thing I would say. And then finally, although it's not within this question itself, the idea, and we may approach this later, of other medications or natural supplements that are being used as part of the regimen, that would be something you'd want to be aware of before you decide to, quote unquote, blindly go into the use of these agents.
So what would be one of the, like, what would you could be allergic to or have a response to? Like you said, anaphylactic shocks, but what would you be allergic to? Like the THC, the CBD, you know, that kind of thing. What are people do that? And what percentage of the population is allergic to that? Like, what have you heard or seen?
Actually, candidly, I've never heard of any allergies to cannabis. But this is something we have to formally put out there, like allergies to Tylenol, allergies to, people have sulfur allergies, these kinds of sort of things. But having said that, you can have a reaction to any one of the components, or more likely with herbs, you may have a reaction to the combination, as you might guess, rather than one kind of isolated chemical. So that's something you would be looking at. And now finally, we're looking at not just formal IgE reactions, which are the immunoglobulin reactions that allergists formally are aware of. We're now seeing reactions involving other kind of antibodies, such as IgG, et cetera, that may not produce the kind of extreme effects that we just mentioned, but rather more prolonged or muted kinds of responses that are still untoward, whether it's bloating or feeling nauseated, that kind of thing. So that has to be kept in mind as well.
Okay, moving on. Does cannabis affect the rate, this is related, at which other drugs are metabolized? Do you draw blood levels of seizure meds more frequently when cannabis is being used, for example?
Jenni, did you want to take this, or?
No, I'll leave all the medical questions to you.
Okay. Yeah, you go ahead, Dr. Traver.
Yes, it does. It does get metabolized through the liver, as other drugs do, and you have to be aware of that. The one agent that's most well advertised is Onfi, which is clobazam. It's a benzodiazepine, and that can increase the blood level, the metabolite, up to 5 times. So you have to be aware of that. And drawing blood levels of seizure meds is probably not an unwise thing, but there's still a dearth of literature in terms of exactly how to approach this for all the different agents. Many agents that you would think would be elevated are not. So it is still being evaluated, but the answer to that is yes for both of these.
Okay, great. Peta?
So here's a specific question. There's a question from a parent here. CBD did not help my 23-year-old son. I now use 1-to-1, so CBD, THC, like 12 milligrams each day in liquid form. But how does one determine the best ratio? And I think this is both of you guys, the question for both of you.
I can start.
Yeah, you can start.
The way that my organization sort of approaches this is we suggest getting one high ratio CBD product and one high ratio THC product. And there's a lot more to it than just CBD and THC. And, you know, I can go on about that forever, but, and then that way it kind of gives you the freedom to create your own ratio that actually works well for your situation. We don't see a whole lot of people that do really well on 1-to-1 in our group. We do surveys, we poll our group, and you know, it's generally for most that answer the polls, they need much more CBD than they would THC, or vice versa, depending on the situation. So we suggest getting 2 different high ratio products, and then just start one or the other. And then once you get at a level, once you're getting an acceptable response with the first major cannabinoid, then we say go ahead, keep that one steady, don't change that, and then incorporate the second one until you figure out what that is too. It's really a balancing act, and that's just kind of, we've just, and this is all based on parent input, parent feedback. So that's all.
How about you?
Well, let me I want to comment on that. This is what I hear from a lot of parents is you just kind of have to play with it and find the right dose. But Dr. Traver, if somebody was to come and see you, I mean, how do you prescribe something to somebody when you're just first starting with them?
Well, the key here is to know what the target symptoms are. As with any kind of agent that you're going to employ, different ratios are utilized for different target symptoms. And people who understand cannabis, both from a professional level and from usage, really comprehend that. So I agree with Jenny that a 1-to-1 ratio is typically not the standard. And most people, professionals, medical people, are using CBD at a higher ratio than THC because in the context of this discussion, we're not looking to get high. We're looking for a medical application of this set of compounds. And although both of these two major cannabinoids have relevance, it really is the ensemble effect that, going back to what Jenny shared, that offers the benefit versus a pure isolate. And that has been observed again and again and again on multiple levels. So I do agree that I would start with a much higher CBD ratio than THC, and I would move forward, depending on the target symptom, using more THC, looking for more nighttime relief for issues thereby. But that's a short response.
Okay, great. Let's move on. Any advice for growing my own cannabis plants and making our own whole plant oils? My son currently uses 4-to-1, but it is expensive. And I also wonder about quality. What is the naturally occurring ratio of CBD to THC in a cannabis plant?
Jenny, did you want to try that one?
I currently don't grow, so I can't answer the first part. But what I can say about a naturally occurring ratio, that varies strain to strain. You know, it's even grow to grow. I mean, you can have 16 different plants of the same, say, Granddaddy Purple, and it just depends on the conditions that it's grown in, whether it's indoors, outdoors, the nutrients. I mean, I know at least that much. But I mean, there are high CBD strains like Pennywise or Remedy or ACDC. There are very high ratios of THC. So there's really nothing, there's no standard ratio. It's a plant. You know, a plant is a plant and it's going to do what it's going to do. So.
Okay. Dr. Traver, do you want to add anything?
Don't you love the names of the different strains of cannabis?
I'm sorry?
Yeah. Don't you love the names of the different strains of cannabis? It's very
yeah. There's some interesting names out there.
I think that growing your own cannabis is first of all, you have to be aware of the statutes of your state. That's obviously the first thing. The second thing is that it is a little bit more complicated than getting some flower pots and putting them in the windowsill. It has to do with, of course, the growing, the pruning, the harvesting, the curing. I'm not a grower, but as Jenny alluded to, it's more involved, and it really requires much more education. And one of the books that I think offers at least a good platform of information is Michael Moskowitz's Medical Cannabis that came out, I think, in 2017. It's a great reference for this, and you can read that.
Great. Okay. Feda.
How much can be done with CBD alone? Does it help with anxiety or sleeplessness? And what dosage is usually recommended to start? I guess, for example, you know how Tylenol is given based on when you start based on the weight or something. Is there anything like that for cannabis?
Well, I can answer from a medical angle. I'm interested to hear what Jenny thinks. The one thing we were taught in child psychiatry is you always start low, go slow. This is kind of a mantra that people endlessly repeat. It has relevance for this agent as well, because you just can't be so presumptuous to start things and go, I'm just going to start at what my neighbor started at. That's just not necessarily applicable. I typically start with less than, believe it or not, a milligram, and I double it, and I capture the target symptom at hand with the right timing. And then I usually start for anxiety during the day with that. And then for sleeplessness, I'll move toward a higher THC component. Therefore, the ratio will decrease from CBD to THC. And then I'll move up into the realm of anywhere from 0.5 milligram per pound. The work by Davinsky and NYU and others is easily and Israel is leading the way in the world on this one, but some places go as high, believe it or not, as 10 to 20 milligrams per pound. It's hard to believe that, but that is, I don't advise that one bit to start with that, but I'm letting you know that there is a range that you can apply. I would always start low and move up.
There's a follow-up question to this that was just submitted. Is there an age restriction for the use of CBD? Would CBD oil help with the anxiety for a 10-year-old boy with autism?
Jenni?
I know I can say in our group, there are patients that are 2 years old. You know, that's, we don't see any issue with age. I don't know, you know, if there's a medical reason why they couldn't take it. Generally, when they're that young, there are seizures involved, or maybe some pretty severe self-injury, things like that. But we also, I guess, just sort of stepping back to the original question, is that we don't really notice that there's a whole lot of correlation with weight or age. And then a lot of our families also actually start around 25 milligrams and go up from there. That's mainly because of the biphasic properties of CBD, that the lower doses can be agitating, higher doses are calming. And since a lot of our kids and adults in the group do tend to have aggression, self-injury, hyperactivity, sometimes those lower doses actually make the symptoms worse until they go up higher. And I know that, you
That's
know,
what you meant by biphasic.
biphasic, yeah, it's just low doses can be agitating, higher doses are calming. That's just
Dr. Traver, have you seen the same thing?
I have not seen a robust pattern followed like that, although I don't think that's out of the question. And I think that the challenge for parents is to try to continue moving forward, even when they see some level of effect that isn't obviously desired. What Jenni alluded to, the agitation or the increase in stimming or hyperactivity, it is not a contraindication to keep moving forward. That's my point, and I think that she's made that well.
Yeah, just keep going up. Keep going up. If it's bothering you, you know, that's what we don't say stop. You know, don't stop. Just keep moving forward.
Right.
Yeah. So we have one other follow-up question to this. CBD works for this mother's son, and she would like to try it on her daughter, but the daughter also has bipolar. Does CBD help people who also have bipolar?
Well, I don't treat bipolar in my clinic as a main target condition. I do know practitioners who are using CBD for this. One of the things that is being found out, and I'll try to get to the point on this, is that we are seeing an increasing amount of evidence showing that neuroinflammation is a component of a number of different quote unquote labeled conditions. Anywhere from autism to Alzheimer's, et cetera. And one of the great properties of CBD is that it does mitigate inflammation, both on the nerves and in the glial cells. So it is certainly something to be, I think, trialed and seen, although I'm not aware of any extant literature that is even equal to the amount we're seeing in autism, which is itself scant. But I don't think it's a contraindication.
Okay, let's move on.
I have one follow-up question after that. Have you seen or heard of any contraindications of mixing cannabis with mood stabilizers, or have you heard of that? Because
cannabis can be used with most agents, but you have to be aware of the interactions. Again, back to the hepatic metabolism. Again, this is an evolving arena of literature. We do not have, decades of this kind of information, but you can use it. You have to be able to know how things are eliminated and then knowing how to start it. So it would take a professional to be able to help assist that. I would not do that on my own if I were a parent, put it that way.
All right, moving on. Feda.
My daughter is 16. She's autistic and has severe behaviors, no seizures. I would like to try cannabis because she had a terrible reaction to pharmaceuticals, but what do? I need to make this legal since she's under 21?
I'm not sure what state this person is in, and it really doesn't matter because in every state,
California.
yeah,
Okay.
okay. So in every state, just because they have adult use or recreational legalization like they do here in California, that's only for 21 and up. Anyone under the age of 21 to be a legal patient has got to get a written medical recommendation. In some other states, they might have a card or a recreation and a card, or a recommendation and a card. It just depends on the state. California does have the recommendation from an MD, and then there's also an additional optional state ID card, which just sort of gives you an extra level of protection. And I know that we have actually had parents here in California, and they do have the medical recommendation. They only give CBD, and CPS can still get called on them. I mean, that's not going to prevent you from getting called. I mean, anyone can call CPS for any reason. But yeah, to make sure that you're a legal patient under 21, you have got to have that written recommendation. And personally, for me, because I'm sorry about my dogs, because I am the conservator for my adult son who is over 21. I also have one for him as well too, because I'm in charge of his medical decisions.
Okay, well, I have another question about that. So, for example, CPS can be called at any time. Like in California, it's legal because you can get the recommendation and the compassion kind of law. But CPS is a federal agency. It runs through federal funding, and it's still illegal through the feds. Now, have you heard of any examples where CPS has actually stepped in and made a point to do something about it?
With our families, I have not heard of it going beyond the worker shows up, they might ask for a copy of the recommendation, they verify it through the doctor that it's still valid. They want to make sure that the meds are locked up, so we always recommend getting some kind of a safe or a small lockbox or something. Just, keep it out of reach, just like any other medication. And then they close the case. For our families, that is the extent of it, but I know that there have been cases in states, even here in California, where even if they're legal, it goes further than that. They might have to go to court, or they might have to, they might have a series of CPS visits. But generally, from what we've heard, even from other cannabis doctors who have had to possibly speak with a CPS worker. Generally those have other circumstances going on too, where there might have been a parent, maybe they had too many plants growing or something, or there might have been issues with the family for other reasons.
Sure.
It's hard. I mean, it might have been just part of a larger issue going on in the household.
But that's good advice, parents, to lock up their stuff for their kids. Thank you.
And anyway. Okay, let's move on. We have so many questions. We just got one that came in, and then we'll go to the one that just popped up on the screen. My nonverbal 15-year-old is responding to CBD at higher doses, calming and seeing less OCD behaviors and more self-directed leisure activities. Nice. He has been on Prozac at increasing doses, but I don't see any effect. How do I gradually replace the Prozac? Dr. Traver?
Well, you're talking about a cross titration, which basically is an increase of one agent and an elimination of the other. Most people give an SSRI, of which Prozac is well known to be one, in the evening because of the calming effects. Some people do use the morning, but that's individual. The bottom line is that if you're going to try to use different agents like this and cross titrate, the idea, again, in keeping in mind hepatic metabolism elimination, you try to be able to give the cannabis agent away from the Prozac, away from any SSRI, and increase that incrementally as you decrease the Prozac, watching for clinical signs, observing for improvement and maintenance of target symptoms being addressed. I don't necessarily know if it's absolutely requisite to get levels. These are not things that are typically obtained, but I think that, again, doing this with some level of professional supervision is very advisable, and not taking it upon yourself.
Okay.
Okay,
What is
Spada, go ahead.
What is the best route of administration? Vaping, tinctures, edibles?
Jenny?
Well, we see a combination of really everything that our families use. We're a little leery of edibles that you can buy in a dispensary because, well, for a variety of reasons. Number one, you have no idea what the strain is, or what the terpenes are. Usually it's an isolate, so it's not going to be as medicinal as something that you would make with some kind of a whole plant oil or whole plant flour. It's very, very easy to make your own edibles. A lot of our families do that. Tinctures are okay, but some of the problems with that is getting the patient to hold it under their tongue for fast absorption. It might be a taste issue, might be a sensory issue. So then they might just ingest it, which is fine too, but it takes a little bit longer to work. Vaping, we actually really, really like vaping for autism because it can stop meltdowns almost instantly, within minutes. It's faster than anything that you can really get pharmaceutical wise. So we really do like vaping for autism. It doesn't last very long, but it's quick. So you would need something beyond the vaping. A lot of our families use vaping as a PRN. So it's just, I'm sorry?
PRN.
A fast acting, like
And as needed too, like really
right.
quick.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's what I meant. As needed. It's as needed. It would be like an Ativan or something, something the equivalent there. So really, whatever works. However fast you need it done. Some of the ingested ones last longer, so that would be something that you would also want to have in your system to get you through a school day, or whatever or to last overnight if it works well for you for sleep. So it's there really is no best. It's just what works best for that individual person.
Dr. Traver, do you have any comments?
Building on what she shared, I agree that I think any kind of inhalant is going to offer, as you would intuitively understand, the quickest access to the blood system. Tinctures tend to be a lot more available in terms of accuracy, in terms of knowing how much you're giving to the individual. Edibles are far less reliable in that. And because of the absorption mechanism, they're not typically recommended. Giving kids, I start with tinctures. That's the bottom line. So I think that's the most reliable. And that, of course, as most people understand, that's the substance, that's the route of delivery that has the most research behind it.
Okay. What can you tell me about the long-term effects of cannabis use? I've heard about increased risk for psychosis and also neurological and learning impairment. Dr. Traver?
There is no literature that I'm aware of in the extant literature available for research and review that documents psychosis as one of the major issues that cannabis use entails. I don't think this is something that I've never seen it. I've never heard of it. Certainly, you can talk about psychoactive effect. We're not talking about psychosis in the strict DSM-5 definition. So I think the long-term effects of cannabis use, the two populations in which that's been at least looked at most with some level of circumspection is the prenatal exposure as well as adolescent use. But not for psychosis, more for neurodevelopment for obviously the prenatal exposure and learning impairments, and then for cognition regarding the other end of the spectrum, the adolescents, but not for psychosis.
Jenny, anything to add? No. Did we lose Jenny?
I muted because my dogs are ridiculous.
Yeah, right.
So, sorry.
Okay, somebody just submitted a question, and I'll turn it back to Feda. How do I find a doctor who is knowledgeable about these products for autism, and also who is under 21?
A doctor who's under 21?
No, the kid.
It's like, that's really
How do I
everywhere.
find, yeah. So how does this mom find a doctor who is knowledgeable for treating a minor with these products?
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
Dr.
Really.
Traver knows you, but assume that she's not in the area. Jenny,
Well,
how do you refer your people?
Unfortunately, there are very few doctors that will, well, number one, because cannabis is a federally illegal Schedule I substance or narcotic, it's technically not legal, for doctors to prescribe it. They can recommend it, and that's what that's why it's called a recommendation letter or certificate and not a prescription. But generally, from what we've found, well, unless you're in Canada, you can get it prescribed in Canada. But typically, what our families wind up doing is just finding a cannabis doctor, getting the recommendation or the card, depending on where they live, and then you're kind of on your own. You have to do your own research. And that's sort of what our nonprofit grew from, was a bunch of families, trying to work together and saying, okay, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And now, that's sort of, we have to figure it out ourselves. There is some research to go off of, but not a ton. So,
Right.
a doctor might have some kind of dosing guidelines, or, they might be more comfortable working with hemp products. But as far as like, THC, then it gets kind of in a funky gray, federally illegal narcotic area.
So you don't
So
list doctors on your website, or you don't know of a website where?
we do have a list of doctors for some states and some areas that our patients have used. So we can definitely refer them to doctors to at least get legal.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's kind of like, trial and error, figure it out on your own with, the support that we can hand you as far as education and experiences goes.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know how comfortable Dr. Traver is with, how in depth he gets with his patients, but most of the doctors that we've seen don't really give any advice at all.
Yeah. Doc in the box. Okay, let's move on. Feda, next
Hang on, I want to follow up with Dr. Traver. What about you, Dr. Traver? How do you interact with cannabis with your patients?
I'm very hands-on. I maintain a relationship with my patients, not just because of cannabis, but because they're also usually invoking other kinds of supplements and even medications. So I insist on continued supervision. Let me make it clear, and I don't necessarily contradict what Jenny said. I think she spoke of the reality, but let me make sure the audience understands that in California, doctors cannot simply certify patients and then turn them over to the advice of non-professionals. But must take an active clinical role of advising, examining, treating, and documenting them, and thereby following them. That anything less than that, in my mind, is irresponsible. I think that should be for any kind of situation, even for supplements, if you're going to do that. Now, whether the patient follows through or not, that's their own business. But I think that the doctor has to be able to document that. That's my personal approach. That's my belief, and others may not be adhering to that, but that's unfortunate, but that's what they do, I guess.
But that's what you stand by. That's how you do it.
Yes.
Right,
so here's the question. Does medical cannabis gradually lose its effectiveness in reducing anxiety-driven behavior, resulting in the need to increase the dosage? And hold on a minute, here's another thing. Do you build a tolerance to cannabis over time in general?
Jenny, did you want to get that, or?
Let's start with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the response to that is, there was one study done about 4 years ago that showed that in N of, I don't know, 110 or whatever it was patients, that a third of the patients developed some level of tolerance defined by the need to increase at least 30% of the dose for some of the target issues, including things, I think it's seizures. The reality is that that's unpredictable, and it probably depends on the person's hepatic metabolism, their enzymes, and their own genetic makeup. Believe it or not, there's now DNA testing being offered to us as professionals so that we can actually look at the SNPs, the single nucleotide polymorphisms of every individual, and find out what might be descriptive, not definitive, but descriptive in terms of whether they would need in augmentative effects for dosing, et cetera, et cetera. But back to the question, it is not predicted, and in most people that I see, they do not develop a tolerance. They do not need to increase the dosage. What really needs to happen is they need to find the dose that works for them for the given target symptom, and make sure that other issues are being addressed as well. Because sometimes parents with autistic children find that they don't it addresses one thing, but it will not address the other target area, and they need to find another supplement for that.
Okay, let's move on. What products are most helpful for sleep?
Jenny, did you want to take that?
Most people use heavy or indica strains that have terpenes like myrcene and linalool. Those are more of the sedating terpenes, and that's like a whole nother thing to get into as far as what terpenes are.
Do you mind? What were those elements?
Myrcene, terpenes. They're kind of they sort of. I'm sorry.
Are they concentrates?
No, it's components of the plant. It kind of dictates the direction that the effect will go. Some of the terpenes are more uplifting, and some people use those for daytime use. Other terpenes are more sedating, and that's, you know, that's a whole can of worms that I can't crack open in a minute. So, but you'll probably want to look for more sedating strains if you're using THC. Unfortunately, according to our family, CBD for sleep has been kind of back and forth. Some of them do take it at night because it really does help them sleep, and other ones can't take it past like 2 p.m. because otherwise it keeps them up all night. So, you know, again, it's very individualized as far as what your response is, what time of day you can use it, what the dose would be. You know, there's no clear-cut answer for this question, unfortunately.
Dr. Traver, do you have any thoughts?
I think that sleep tends to be most facilitated, in my mind, by the appropriate ratio that's employed. And again, to the response made earlier, you have to be able to titrate that, dose that over time to find out what works best for your child or you. I don't think that, and I agree with Jenny, terpenes are important. I don't think that a high CBD at night is going to provide the kind of effect you want when it comes to relaxing. One thing of note, when we talk about additional organic compounds, it's well known that, believe it or not, raw cacao has a high anandamide level. That is one of the phytocannabinoids, and basically that can be used to augment some of the desired effects if you combine it with cannabis. So this is something that's being looked into, that plus turmeric. I'm not trying to get too diverse here, but I'm letting you know that I think when it comes to sleep, different agents can augment the target symptom being addressed. And I think that you have to be able to find out what works best for your individual child.
Okay, we have a follow-up question to the kind of federal law question, which is, what about travel with your medical cannabis? Do you get in trouble with TSA?
I know that there was just, there are articles floating around where THC said it clarified their stance on it, but it really didn't clarify their stance. You know, it said that TSA isn't necessarily looking for hemp. Now, this is just hemp. But they could still turn you over to local authorities. There was another article maybe a week before that was published that basically they're arresting people left and right at Dallas, at the airport in Dallas. So it really depends on the local, you know, I guess how much the local authorities want to enforce it. Crossing state lines with THC that's a federal issue. You know, it's a federal, but even if you're going from one local state to another, or one legal state to another, it's still, you know, federal trafficking across that state line. You also cannot possess THC in national parks or at the post office, or, you know, anywhere where it's considered federal land. You're going to have a big issue there with legalities.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Feda?
We were using CBD oil. I found we had a good streak for manic behavior, would set in after 3 or 4 weeks. We'd take her off and we'd have great behavior on 0 CBD and no other meds. So it makes me think, did we really see a change with CBD? We have also been trying to find the right strain of THC. Indica made her extremely hyper, and hybrid was a little better. How do you find the perfect strain? I'm assuming the question is trial, and the answer is trial and error.
Right.
Here, let's just address the first paragraph.
To me, that sounds like a low dose honeymoon phase. You know, it might have worked well for, sometimes people see low doses working well, and this is just in our group. I'm sure Dr. Traver has a different experience with that, but they might say, oh, we gave 2 drops and it was great, and then like a week later, all hell breaks loose and things are maybe worse than they were before. But I would say to this person, I would increase the CBD. You know, I mean, it's that kind of goes back to what I was saying before about CBD being biphasic, and if it's agitating at lower doses, just go up. I know it probably seems counterintuitive to give more if you're seeing bad reactions, but that's kind of what we've found out in the group, and from other doctors that we work with pretty closely as well too. But again, that's just us.
Yeah, and then she talks about indica, which is supposedly more calming, making her daughter hyper. And I remember when we were talking the other day, both of you were talking about people who have paradoxical reactions to these products. Maybe you can speak to that.
And again, this could just be the terpenes too. And I didn't mean to cut Dr. Traver off, but just because a strain says it's an indica or says it's a sativa, that doesn't mean that it actually has higher levels of sedating terpenes. I mean, my son needs very high levels of myrcene and linalool, which are very sedating, but I have actually bought strains for him that were labeled sativa, but when I dug deeper and saw the labs, they actually had very, very sedating terpenes. Or levels of terpenes, or the person, is what possibly could be what we consider to be an opposite. And if they have more ADHD symptoms, it would be like the stimulants that would be prescribed in the medical world, stimulants to calm ADHD. So this person might actually need the more uplifting terpenes to calm them as a stimulant would.
Okay.
Doctor?
Okay.
Can I?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Excellent response, in my opinion, by Jenny. And I will say this: I only employ strains or CBD or THC or cannabis, whatever you want to call it, where it's actually batch specific certified. So I want my patients to know. So I'm not the person walking into the dispensary, you understand. I'm a medical doctor. So I'm responsible to know with a level of certainty that may exceed what others are tolerated to have, exactly what my patients are getting. So I don't look for batches that were certified last year or in January of 2019. I want batches that batch by batch, bottle by bottle, I have certification from a third party laboratory that where I know exactly what you're getting. And to answer this question, I don't know, she alluded to this, how much how accurate what this woman was told, what constituted that preparation. I just don't know, and namely, I'm not sure she does. So we're not hearing the number of milligrams, the ratio, this whole thing, and with a third-party certification, that would give you a platform off of which to dive, knowing where to go from there.
We had a couple questions. I'm going to change the subject a little bit and move on. A couple questions come in about antipsychotics. So Dr. Traver, if a parent wants to wean their child off of antipsychotics and try out medical cannabis instead, what are some of the considerations?
Well, number one, before you wean off anything, you want to be able to let the psychiatrist who's involved with that patient know what's going on, because that's just continuity of care. Whether they agree with it or not, that's something for them to render. I think you have a responsibility to provide literature, et cetera, et cetera. But the point there is, I would not wean off anything without a professional being involved. Again, I would do it with an understanding of the metabolic and elimination effects, and the idea of how to get an idea of how to cross titrate. I would do it with an understanding of what agents are most compelling for that person. You do not want to strip the individual of an agent that they are heavily dependent on. Otherwise, they end up becoming self-injurious or violent to their family or others, just so you can say, I'm weaning them. So I think that's very important. And how long it takes is probably individual. I don't think there's a rule. And frankly speaking, although we all have this kind of idealistic idea that we can just put someone on an herb, the reality is you may not be able to achieve that. You have to be able to say, well, this may or may not be successful, and it's a realistic goal to try to at least abate or to lower some of the doses of these antipsychotics, which do have dyslipidemia, type 2 DM involved. These are not unrealistic side effects. But saying that, you have to be able to say, okay, I may not be able to get this off, but we can at least bring it down a little bit, and that should be done in conjunction again with the professional.
So Jenni, you've had personal experience with this with your son. Can you speak to it?
I have, and I just kind of want to clarify that, this is something in our group that we do not touch. We're not doctors. We do not help, and we get weaning questions every single day. We don't go there. That's not, we urge people, you have got to work with a doctor, and, just, it has to be done very, very slowly and very carefully, because some of these things, my son actually had a seizure 3 days after we started weaning his Ativan. It was withdrawal. That was the first seizure he ever had in his life, and he had a grand mal seizure in the back of the car on the freeway.
Right.
So that wasn't fun, and it is not something to mess with. But anyway, so yeah, my son was on, when we started cannabis, he was on 9 different prescriptions. That was 18 pills a day. It did take us several months, and unfortunately, because of our situation with just moving here and with all the meds he was on, we didn't have a ton of very good guidance, very thorough guidance with the weaning. But as we did wean, which took 7 months, and that is actually insanely fast for a wean, from what I've heard from other people who have, and not even the autism population, but other people who have stopped opioids or whatever the situation is with the help of cannabis. That's very, very fast. But as the pharmaceuticals went down, the cannabis went up. We had to achieve that balance to make sure that he wasn't deficient in what was helping him. But he has been fully weaned off of all meds, aside from his insulin injections. So since January of 2016. So it's about 3.5 years he's been entirely med-free from those 18 pills a day. And I think at this point, it's probably like around, I stopped counting a couple months ago, but I would estimate that that's around 30,000 pills that he hasn't had to take since then.
My God.
So,
and he had some adverse reactions, right, to his meds.
He did, yeah. He was on the atypical antipsychotics. He was on mood stabilizers, antidepressants. Just they went through benzodiazepines, 12 milligrams a day of Ativan on a daily basis, which is insane. Nobody should take that much, and that was with all of the other antipsychotics and everything else.
Oh.
But we ran out of options. Unfortunately, the psychiatrists never did any kind of follow-up blood work with all those medications. And when he was 13 years old, he was diagnosed with type 1 and 2 diabetes at the same time. And we had heard that it was likely to the very, very heavy usage of the atypical antipsychotics, which there are studies that you can find that associate that use with diabetes. And at the very end of, right when we moved here to California, he just started developing symptoms of tardive dyskinesia. He started having like a tic and like a head throw thing. I think probably about 6 months after stopping all medications, that luckily went away, but that can absolutely be a permanent issue from heavy long-term psychotropic medication use. Okay. So luckily he's healthy. He's only on cannabis and the insulin shots, and that's it. And he's doing wonderful.
Okay, Fede. It is not there.
I think she froze.
Can you tell me if you recommend a specific cannabis product for a teen with perseverative thoughts that are difficult to redirect from and cause anxiety? A little specific.
Jenni, do you have experience with this? Do you want to share?
It's really hard to say without more information. As far as, anxiety, most people treat with CBD. So I'll just kind of divert back to you, Dr. Traver, but it's just kind of hard without much more information or what they're actually considering. Is it OCD or, what are the thoughts? So I'll leave that alone.
I am aware of our time. This is a question that goes down levels that are not related to cannabis, for which there's testing and treatment. And the individual who asked this question needs to know that they need to seek somebody out who is able to look at both immune issues as well as possible infectious issues. Not saying that is by any means guaranteed to be involved, but that needs to be explored. I do believe that cannabis can help alleviate some of the symptoms or behaviors that she's alluded to. And I would start again with a high CBD, lower THC ratio in the daytime. There are other agents that you can add to that are well known, that are non-prescription, that you can add to that and augment the relief for these kinds of issues that are not related to cannabis, and that can be discussed more at some point with a practitioner who has some familiarity with this.
All right, fair enough. Let's move on in the interest of time. Let's see, we already did that. Is off-label use of Epidiolex permissible to treat anxiety in a person with autism who has epilepsy? Does not have the indicated conditions, Dravet or Lennon-Gastaut. Go ahead, Dr. Traver.
You as an individual, you can use anything off-label you want. The issue is, and we're discussing is whether insurance would actually reimburse for that. As you know, Epidiolex is the separation, and
we're having a little audio problem. We're getting feedback, Dr. Traver. I'm so sorry. I don't know if it's the system or you. Okay, try again, Dr. Traver. See what happens.
Epidiolex is a pure CBD preparation. It is used for the seizures indicated. Whether people have tried it or not for anxiety, I don't know. Typically, pure isolates are not recommended for these issues that we're discussing today, because whole plant extracts, whether you call it the entourage effect or the ensemble effect, they have rendered a superior result consistently. Epidiolex is a great agent that Davinsky and others have used for the symptoms involved or the target symptoms involved. But the issue, again, I think Jenni brought this up very appropriately, insurance will not cover that if it's used for something off-label, almost assuredly.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to just address quickly two other questions that came in. Does any dispensary provide batch certified information or information about, the particular components of a particular product, or do only, or do just certain dispensaries provide that information?
I can't speak for every dispensary, but Jenni?
Yeah. I think it really just depends on who their growers are, who their suppliers are. That's kind of where it comes down to. If you're looking at something like edibles, I've never seen lab reports of any sort for edibles of any kind. A lot of the pre-made tinctures or infusions, again, it depends on the company, and even with the flower itself. And our group is we're big fans of just buying flower, getting as close to the natural state as you can, and then you can make your own infusions or capsules or whatever you want to do. Again, that's hit or miss. It really varies. It varies by the grower. It varies by the state law. It varies by tons of different things. I mean, some states you don't find any information at all, and other ones they have to have every single detail available. So,
Got it. Okay. And then another question that came in, what are the specific elements that are needed in a letter of recommendation from a doctor for somebody who's under 21? Do either of you know?
This is not something that has been well defined. I reviewed state law here in California, and again, this is an evolving and it's a moving target. I'm sure that law will continue to morph as the culture evolves as well. Typically, for any letter of medical recommendation as a doctor, you need to understand you need to make a clear statement of indication why you're using it, that there's the symptoms or the conditions you're looking to treat. You would hopefully have some letter of medical reference involved, that you're not just making this up on your own because you're a doctor, and you want to be able to offer some assurance there's going to be ongoing supervision and involvement, which is, again, it goes back to what Jenni said. It's not being done apparently at a level that is parents are experiencing. So that's what I understand to be the need.
Okay, hold on. That's a little bit. Let me see enough. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'll go back. Oh wait, no, sorry. Beta, are you back?
I'm on.
You're back with us. Okay. Sorry about that.
All right.
Okay, this is sort of a
big one. Okay. I've read that indica stains tend to be better for calming aggression. My kid tends to be the opposite kid, and also tends to get all the side effects from meds. If I were to try sativa or hybrid stain, what would I look for to tell me it's the wrong way to go? Two medications I felt have made a big difference are Depakote for abnormal EEG activity, which has helped with sleep, and Vyvanse, which helped with focus and attention. Unfortunately, we've had to take him off Vyvanse for aggression. Any thoughts? And he's gained way too much weight from both Depakote and Prozac. That's a big concern. Thank you. Let's unpack that a little bit. Let's start with, so indica tends to be better for calming and aggression. Yes or no, generally?
Yes, that can help.
Okay.
This is a very patient-specific question.
Okay.
And really, this is borderline medical advice.
Okay.
I'm going to speak in generalities. So again, going back to some of the content we've already reviewed, this needs to be done in conjunction with a provider, a licensed physician, or somebody who has an awareness of the different considerations we've already reviewed: metabolism, pharmacokinetics, interactions. A level of DNA pharmacogenetic profiling may be indicated in this child, as well as other individuals who are in this kind of more involved, profile. Obviously, weight gain is a concern with some of these other agents, but we do not necessarily see that with cannabis, so that's something that's good to know. Wrong way to go. Well, like as we've again discussed, over sedation, some evidence of untoward reaction like an allergy, but more importantly, a paradoxical effect of activation, as they say in psychiatry, would be something you don't want to relentlessly tolerate. So those are the things you would look for with almost any medication. And again, it depends on the timing, how fast you go, when it's given, a level of genetic analysis perhaps that might be descriptive, not defining, but descriptive for this individual, that might help you understand what kind of, how deep an interaction this might have with the agents on hand. Those are some preliminary thoughts.
Okay.
Got it. What I'd like to do, because we only have one more minute, I would like to just hand it over to our speakers to see if there is any kind of basic advice or basic thoughts that you would like to share before we close. Jenni?
I just want to stress to parents, don't be afraid to try it and don't give up. There are so many aspects of cannabis, again, because it's a plant, and there's just a million different combinations of ratios and terpenes and this and that, and we've only really touched on CBD and THC, but we're seeing a lot of success with CBG, and some people are seeing success with CBN for sleep. There's a lot out there to try, and a lot of our families have seen great success, especially with some of the more the larger issues that our kids have with the aggression and the self-injury and things like that. But don't be afraid, research, learn as much as you can, take your time, document what you're doing. It is a lot of trial and error, but if you can keep good notes, and if you have as much information as you can find on the product with the terpenes and everything, keeping note of that and the reactions with that will make things a whole lot easier to get through as far as a trial and error period. And it's worth it. It is so worth it to a lot of our families, just unbelievably worth it.
Okay, Dr. Traver?
I endorse everything that was just shared, as well as the fact that there are very few agents available to us as professionals that can offer the level of benefit without the attendant risks and untoward side effects, which everybody, whether they're doctors, therapists, parents, or patients, understand sadly accompany so many of what is in our little black bag. And I'm very encouraged to know that the level of research, again, being led by Israel right now, on a global level, is putting forward, and places like NYU with Orrin Devinsky for seizures, is really taking a firm, evidence-based, peer-reviewed journal stand that offers this. It's not going to cure world hunger. I don't think anyone has said that in this webinar, but based on where our patients are, they deserve the level of investigation and attempted relief for some of the things that are absolutely torturous for them and their families. And knowing that most parents do not necessarily turn to this first is a bit unfortunate, because I think that parents often come to this as, I don't mean to say this in the wrong way, the agent of last resort. This should not be an agent of last resort. This should be something that is investigated. Our parents are generally very smart, informed, and they're willing to do what it takes for their children. And I trust my parents. They're not trying to play games. This is not funny. It's not something that we're doing to waste time. And I really want my parents to understand that. So the audience needs to look into this, and they deserve an investigation. And some of the references I provided, again, Moskowitz's book, Medical Cannabis, and others out there, are excellent sources to start the journey.
Yeah.
Great. Tita, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes. You know, as being an autism parent for the last, 15 years, what I can say is that anecdotally, as Jenny, as you can speak, I've had friends that have had kids with a kid with so many seizures, he had to be in a medically induced coma for a month, and cannabis is the only thing that helped him. And kids who have such severe injurious behaviors that the only thing that helped him was cannabis. And just what I say is that one thing I know is it gives the kids some quality of life that they deserve and gives the family the break and health and mental health where they can take care of their child and their family unit. So really, I feel like this is a really good way to treat their kids without the side effects that pharmacological interventions have. And I truly wholeheartedly support this. And I think this is a great, great thing for our children. So I do this. And also I want to just tell the audience, if there's any type of webinars that they want to hear from us or any information, please write to us and let us know.
info@sfautismsociety.org. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Traver and Jenni Mai, for being with us today. And their contact or their website information is there. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And this, again, it will be recorded or is being recorded. So you can get it online, and we will also share with all attendees the link. The link will also be posted on our homepage. All right, signing off. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.